Hello friends, in this lesson we will study the CIB ABM unit 4, and the name of the unit is the theories of the interest. Theories of the interest. What are the theories of the interest? See friends, some basic introduction part. See what is interest? In what is the interest? Basically, interest, we all know what is the interest. We are working in a bank and we have already passed the JAIIB. That means we all know what is the interest. Let's see, actually, by definition, it is the fees paid by the borrower of an asset, particularly money, to the owner of the asset as a compensation for its use over a period of time. That means, actually, what is interest? It is the fee. It is the fee charged for the use of money. It is the fees charged for the use of money. Basically, it is the purest form of fees charged. Okay. Now see, whatever is the interest paid, has the two main components. Very first is the fees for the use of the money, and second is the compensation for the risk. That means, if we have given the loan to the customer, and if customer becomes default in the payment, then the risk of become a NPA. That is nothing but the compensation for the risk, and that is called as nothing but the credit risk. That means the loan which you have given goes to default, becomes NPA, and that is called nothing but the credit risk. Okay. That is mainly the interest paid has mainly two components. But if we can see broadly, interest has the different components. Like very first is the use of the money, that is nothing but the interest. And the risk involved, trouble involved, then mainly if there is a different time period for the loans, then there may be a different rate of interest. This is the basic of the what is the interest and what are the components. Let's move to the actual syllabus. See friends, what is the concept of interest rate? That we all know. Basic, what is interest rate? Basic, that is the fee charged on the for the use of money. And what is the compound interest? That we all know. That you can just go through the notes. Basically, my aim is to give the more importance on this unit is the exam oriented points, right? Mainly the interest rate differ due to the various reason. Why the interest rate is different? Very first is the if the different borrowing period. That means, if the period for the loan is for the 5 year and for the 10 year, the rate of interest for the 10-year loan will be more as compared to the 5-year tenure of the loan. Okay, that is the basic that you all know. The second is the different security. That means, for example, in a personal loan there is no security, that's why rate of interest is more as compared to the gold loan, because in a gold loan we are having security as a gold. That's why in a gold loan rate of interest is less as compared to the personal loan. Okay, that is basic the security. Next is the what actually determines the interest rate. How the interest rate is determined? What are the factors that affects in the determination of the interest rate? See, the one of them is opportunity cost, second is the inflation, and third is the GDP growth. Okay. Now see one by one. Basically, I am my aim in this unit is to cover the Keynes model. Then important is the Hicks-Hansen's theory, that we will see in detail. Very first, what is the opportunity cost and how the opportunity cost affects in the determination of the interest rate. See friends, suppose you are lending, suppose you are a banker and you are lending at the rate of 9%, to the personal loan. And at the same time, if you have an opportunity that you can lend money at the rate of 12% for the gold loan, then which you will prefer? If you are giving this personal loan at a 9% because of the RBI mandatory mandates, that means you are losing the opportunity that earning more in the 12% of gold loan. right? That means that is nothing but the opportunity cost. That is nothing but the opportunity cost. You are losing the opportunity of gaining more, right? That's nothing but the opportunity cost. That's why the interest rate is different. Another important thing is, see, inflation, how inflation affects in the determination of the interest rate. See friends, if inflation is more, why inflation is more? Because there is more money in the market. If there is more money in the market, then inflation will be more. To control the inflation, what RBI will do? RBI will suck money from the market, right? That means RBI will increase the reverse repo rate. So what happen? Actually, the money will be sucked. If there is very less money in the market, RBI will infuse money in the market. That means interest rate will be decreased. In this fashion, inflation also affect the determination of the rate of interest. This is the basic. Now we have to move to the important part. And see, one important here also, how the GDP growth affects the interest rate. See, if you want to grow fast, if your country want to grow fast, then what should be your target? If the more GDP is nothing but the more country growth, right? So how the GDP can increase? GDP is nothing but the goods and services produced in the country. That is the final goods and services produced, the value of final goods and services produced in the country. When the final goods and services will be produced, when the industrialist will get the loan at the cheaper rate, right? That time only the GDP will grow, because industrialists get loan from the banks and they can produce more at the that's why the GDP can increase. In this fashion, GDP growth is also important in the determination of rate of interest. Okay, that's it. Now we will going to move to the core part of that unit. What is the core part? Theories of the interest. The core part of the unit is the theories of the interest. In this, what we have to study mainly the Keynes liquidity preference theory, and the Hicks-Hansen ISLM curve. Hicks-Hansen ISLM curve. So friends, let's move to the next. Very first, see here. Very first, see Keynes liquidity preference theory. Remember, liquidity preference theory, very first important MCQ. Liquidity preference theory is given by, answer is Keynes. Okay, one liner MCQ is here. Next, according to Keynes, remember here, what do you mean by liquidity preference? The name itself, it is a self-explanatory. See friends, liquidity means what? I have already told you in the previous many videos. Liquidity is nothing but the how cash is easily available, how cash is easily flow like liquid. That means it should be available on instant demand. That means it should be a liquid. That is the liquidity preference theory. According to a case, money should be having liquidity, right? Money should be having liquidity, and based on that, Keynes given some theory. See, according to Keynes, what the Keynes says, the rate of interest in the market, is mainly decided by the liquidity preference. That means, what is liquidity? Basically, see, the rate of interest is determined by the demand and supply of the money. Demand and supply. What is basically demand and supply? Nothing but the maintaining liquidity in the market. Okay, how the important one-liner MCQ is also here. See friends, one MCQ is here. According to a Keynes theory, the rate of interest is determined by supply and demand of the money. Okay, what is demand for the money? That we all know. What is supply of money? That we have already learned in the second unit. Now see, you can see here photo of Keynes. Why I am showing you the photo? Because the pictorial representation is helped in the you can easily remember in the form of picture. See the picture of Keynes. He is the Keynes, and he is also called as the father of the macroeconomics. Remember, this is very important MCQ. Who is the father of macroeconomics? Is the Keynes. And remember one also, in the first unit we have studied Smith definition. Adam Smith is called as the father of the microeconomics. Adam Smith is called as the father of microeconomics. And remember, Adam Smith is also called as the father of modern economics also. Modern economics also. Okay. See, now we will see how the person. See, he is the person of person Keynes, who has given the theory, that is the liquidity preference theory. Liquidity preference theory. Now see what actually Keynes want to give the theory. See, very first, Keynes liquidity preference theory. See, I have prepared some handwritten notes for you. Apart from that printed notes, you can see. Very important. According to a Keynes liquidity preference theory, according to a Keynes, rate of interest is a purely monetary phenomenon. Remember, one-liner MCQ. According to a Keynes, rate of interest is dash monetary phenomenon or a relative phenomenon, or etc. etc. You have to remember, according to a Keynes, money is the purely a monetary phenomenon. Next, according to a Keynes, or we can say, for the Keynes liquidity preference theory, what is second assumption? The rate of interest is determined by what? Demand and supply of the money. Demand and supply of the money. That is nothing but the liquidity, and that is called as the liquidity preference theory. Okay. Now next, according to Keynes, there are only two type of assets. According to Keynes, Keynes says there are only two types of assets in which people invest. People invest only in two type of assets. Very first, what is first? The cash or the currency, and the current deposit with the bank. That means you either invest in the cash, that is cash, and the current deposit with the banks, that is current account balance mainly, or you can only invest in the long-term bond. And remember, in the cash or the currency or the current account balance, there will be no interest paid, where in case of the long-term bond there will be interest earned. Ready? That means people either can invest in the zero interest or mainly to earn the interest. That is according to Keynes. Remember, this is very very important. Each and every line from this unit, from these slides onward can frame a question in your examination. So remember, up till what we have studied, according to Keynes, rate of interest is a monetary phenomenon, and it is determined by demand and supply of money. And there are only two types of asset. First is the cash currency and current deposit balance, and second is the long-term bond. Okay. Now, if the level of a nominal income, what is nominal? Nominal means current. Suppose today is the 5th of January, then today's income, that is the current income, that is the income at the current price, that is nothing but the nominal income. Okay. If the level of a nominal income is more, the more will be money held. And if the rate of interest is higher, there will be lower demand for the money for the speculative purpose. What do you mean by speculative purpose? The means purpose, that is the other purpose, to earn more money, that is mainly in the bond investment. See friends, if rate of interest is higher, then nobody want to take loan from the banks, right? What they will do, if the rate of interest, that is nominal rate of interest, is higher, the people will prefer to invest in the bonds and to earn more, right? That is why if the rate of interest is higher, then nobody will going to take the loan. That's why the money used for the speculative purpose, that means for the other purpose to earn more, will be less. That means the demand for that will be less. Next, remember, if the current rate of interest, is greater, is more than the expected rate of interest in the future. That means if right now the rate of interest is more than the expected rate of interest in the future, then what people will do? People will invest more in bonds and less cash will be holding. That means if the rate of interest is higher today, what I will do? I will immediately invest in the bonds to earn more, and I will hold less cash. Second, if the current rate of interest is less than the expected rate of interest in the future, what I will do? See, what I will do, what people will do? People will hold more cash and will wait for the rate of interest to be increased in the future. That means less cash in the hands. okay, and less investment, more cash in the hands and less investment in the bonds. Now what is the money demand curve? What is the money demand curve that we have to see? Money demand curve, see, quantity of money demanded, that is money demand will increase if the rate of interest is low, right? If the rate of interest, see, in the banks, suppose it is a 2% rate of interest, then everybody will run to the bank to demand for the loan, and that is nothing but the, if the money if the rate of interest is less, the quantity of money demanded will be more. That is nothing but the liquidity preference. That is nothing but basically a liquidity preference. See here, at a given level, at the given level of a nominal income, the curve can be drawn. See, this is the curve drawn. This is the rate of interest on the vertical axis and the amount in money on the horizontal axis, and this line, this curve is nothing but your liquidity preference curve. Liquidity preference curve, it is also called as the MD, that is the money demand curve. Money demand curve. See friends, you can see easily in the picture, if the rate of interest is the 8%, then quantity of money demanded is M2, and if you increase the rate of interest at a 10%, the quantity of demanded will be M1, that means less than the M2. That means here we can say, if rate of interest is increased, then demand for the money will decrease, right? That means if the rate of interest in the bank is increased, then nobody will come to the bank for demand of the money, that is demand for the loan. Okay, I think you have come to know what is the liquidity preference curve, what is the money demand curve. Remember, liquidity preference or the money demand curve is a downward sloping. There is a this is downward sloping curve, that you have to remember. How can you remember? Just remember, it is a demand curve, that is liquidity preference curve, and we have learned in the previous chapter also that it is a downward sloping. Demand curve is downward sloping. Now our target is to move to the next slide. See friends, see here in the next slide, what I have already explained. See, you can see here, that is in from that demand, that is liquidity preference curve, we can see easily, and we can observe here that if the rate of interest is increases, then the amount of money or the cash held will be decreases. If the rate of interest is more, people will invest in the bonds, and what we can conclude from that, that the demand for money is inversely proportional to the rate of interest. That is very, very important. Demand for the money is inversely proportional to the rate of interest. One liner MCQ. Also, the curve is downward sloping. That is what I have already explained to you. Then, if the rate of interest is decreases, demand for the money increases. That I have already told in this previous slide. See here, if the rate of interest is decreases, as the rate of interest decreases from 10 to 8%, the increase the money demand from will increase from M1 to M2. That is M1 to M2. That I already explained to you. See next, what is the determination of the rate of interest? That is the equilibrium. How to determine the rate of interest? See friends, we what we are studying. Remember, we are studying the Keynes model. Supply of money is determined by RBI. Who supplies the money? How supply of money is controlled? It is controlled by the RBI. That's why here we are taking the supply of money is constant, because remember, supply of money is determined by monetary authority, and our RBI is the monetary authority. Now see friends, supply of money is determined by RBI. Another LPC, that is the liquidity preference curve, that is the LP curve, that is the demand curve, and SS is nothing but the supply, that is the money supply curve. See here how the curve is drawn, how to determine the rate of interest using the LP curve. See, rate of interest is plotted on vertical axis, and money demanded or supplied is plotted on the horizontal axis. See, this is the LP curve that we have already learned in the previous slide. That is the LP curve, downward sloping, and money supply is vertically we have taken as a constant, right? Vertically we have taken it as a constant. See, this intersection of that supply and demand is called as equilibrium, and equilibrium demand is equal to supply, that we have already learned in the previous video. Now see some observation that are very, very important. 10% rate of interest is equilibrium. Here we can say the intersection point, they refer to the rate of interest 10%, so 10% is the equilibrium rate of interest. If rate of interest is more than that equilibrium rate of interest, that means if the current rate is 12%, that is more than the equilibrium rate of interest is 10%, then what happen? Then there will be a disequilibrium, that is the supply is greater than the demand. That means if the rate of interest is more than the equilibrium rate of interest, that means supply is more than the demand. Then what happen? That means which rate of interest which is higher than the equilibrium will reduce the rate of interest. Automatically the rate of interest will be reduced and to achieve the equilibrium. Okay, and similarly, if the current rate of interest is less than the equilibrium rate of interest, that means this the supply is less than demand, that means demand is more than supply, and that will result in the increase in the rate of interest. Similarly, how, see, if a supply if a demand is more and supply than the supply, then automatically rate of interest will increase, right? For example, if 100 people come to your bank to get the loan at the 9%, and what you will do, you will increase that rate of interest simply to earn more, right? Simply, that means what happen, when demand is more than supply, rate of interest will increases to achieve the equilibrium, to get the equilibrium. Okay, I think you come to know what is basic how to determine the rate of interest. Now what is our next task? We have to study effect of increasing money supply. If we increase the money supply, then what will be the effect? See, the curve is same, rate of interest versus the quantity, right? And this is the our LP curve, that is the demand curve, money demand curve, that is the MD or LP, you can say money demand curve. And previously we have taken supply as a constant. Here we will study if we vary the supply. This is the S1 and this is the S2. Remember friends, if a supply is increased to S1 to S2, that means if we increase the supply from S1 to S2, what happened? Previously there was a rate of interest of 10%, then rate of interest will go to 8%. You can observe here, that means rate of interest will falls down from 10% to 8%, and equilibrium will shift from E1 to E2. And similarly, if the money supply falls from M2 to M1, that means if money supply falls from M2 to M1, that means money supply is decreased from M2 to M1, then rate of interest will increase from 8 to 10%. Rate of interest will increase from 8 to 10%, and equilibrium again shift from E2 to E1. That is basically that means what is the conclusion? If the supply of the money in the economy increases, then rate of interest will be decreased. That is the basic funda, and vice versa. Okay, now we have studied by varying the supply of the money. Now we will study by varying the demand for the money, that is the shift in money demand, that is the liquidity preference. See, rate of interest versus quantity of money, and this is we have kept here the supply curve is constant, the vertical line is constant, and we are varying the demand curve, okay. This is MD1 demand and MD2, that is money demand 2. See friends, if the money demanded is increased, that is from MD1 to MD2, if it is increased, in the last unit I have already told you, if the curve shift outward, that is shift to the right or shift to the outward, that means increase in demand, right? That means if the money demand is shifted, that means increased from MD1 to MD2, the rate of interest will increase from 8% to 10%. The rate of interest will increase from 8% to 10%, and the new equilibrium will shift to from E1 to E2. Now similarly, if the fall in money demand, now say if the fall in the money demand, due to which, if there is a fall in money demand, if there is decrease in money demand, due to which the rate of interest due to the increase in the rate of interest, that means if the rate of interest is increased, the demand for money will be fall, and that will lead to reduce the rate of interest and shift equilibrium from E2 to E1, from E2 to E1. That is basically what is the conclusion? That is basically simple conclusion is there. If a demand is more, then what happen? Rate of interest will increase. If demand is false, that means demand false means rate of interest has been reduced. Okay, that is the basic one line underline to, that is one line you have to study from that all graphs. So friends, one important thing what I want to tell you, we don't want to be an economist, we just want to pass the JAIIB examination. So what our aim should be? Our aim should be to understand what is the output of the theory, not the detailed procedure that theory, how the theory becomes. We don't want to prove the theory, we have to just study the output of the theory. Next is very important, friends, we have to study the Hicks-Hansen synthesis. That is very important. H and H synthesis, that is the Hicks-Hansen synthesis, that is also called as the ISLM core model. Very important, that is the ISLM core model. And that almost that is very important for your examination. Only the question are asked generally from the Keynes theory, Hicks-Hansen theory, rest of the part is useless. Okay, see, very important, each line from this slide will can frame a question from your examination. From see, Hicks and Hansens were those two scientists. I think I have their photos, you can see here, you can see, for if you see the photo you can easily remember. See, this is the Hicks and this is the Hansen. There were two scientists and both them worked to demonstrate the Hicks-Hansen synthesis. Now we have to study how they did their work. So friends, basically remember what is important line is here. Hicks and Hansen done synthesis between the classical theory and the Keynes theory. We have already studied the Keynes liquidity preference theory. What the Hicks and Hansen done, they have synthesized, they have derived, they have aggregated two theories. First is the classical theory of the interest and second is the Keynes theory. That means they have studied that both two theories and synthesized to form something new. Okay, first line very important for your MCQ point of view. Second, first it is also called as the ISLM curve model. That means what is IS? IS is nothing but the income saving. You have to remember because they may ask question. IS in the Hicks-Hansen synthesis theory stands for I for interest, yes for saving, or anything they can give, right? So you have to remember I for the income and yes for the saving. They may give I for the interest or yes for different word. You have to remember IS stand for the income saving curve, and they was derived from classical theory. IS curve, remember there are two curves, IS and LM. So IS curve is derived from the classical theory. This is also the 1 mark MCQ. IS is derived from which theory? First option classical theory, second option Keynes theory, third option different theory. So remember IS curve is derived from the classical theory. Now next, LM curve. And LM curve is derived from the Keynes theory that we have all know. In the previous slide I have already told you Keynes theory is also called as the Keynes liquidity preference theory. That means liquidity, that is liquidity. LM curve, that is liquidity money stock, that is LM curve is derived from the Keynes theory. Okay, now see the intersection of the IS and LM curve. The intersection of the IS and LM curve determines the rate of interest. That means final what is the output of that theory? What they have done, they have intersected two curves to form the to determine the rate of interest. All we are going to learn, all will come to the at the end the point that determine the rate of interest. Okay, now first what we have to do, we have to derive the IS curve. Now we have to see the intersection of them. First we will see derivation of each by one. See derivation of the IS curve. See here, you can see here and how they intersect. This is the IS curve, this is the downward sloping. This is because I have already told you IS is nothing but the liquidity preference, and liquidity is demand, that is downward sloping, and LM is upward sloping. See derivation for the IS curve, how the IS curve is derived. See, I have already told in the beginning, it is based on the classical theory of rate of interest. See, derivation. See, that derivation is not important for your examination. What is important is the output. What is important is the output. But to understand basic, I will give some brief idea about how the IS curve is derived. See, rate of interest versus saving and investment. These three curves, that is SY, S1Y1, S2Y2 and S3Y2, S3Y3, and this line, that is called as the that is our derived line. This line, that three by intersection at the 3 points, we come to know that this line is derived and plotted in this here second figure, so that you come to know, that means how we have derived this figure from this figure. Okay, see here, when increase in income, when the income is increased, the saving curve will shift to the right. The saving curve will shift to the right, means first saving curve was the first this will shift to this, then after that this will shift to the right. It means when the income is increased, that curve shift to the right. That means, for example, S1Y1 to S2Y2, S2Y2 to S3Y3, and so on. That means if the income is increased, the rate of interest will decrease. That means if the income is increased from this curve to this curve, that means rate of interest will fall from R3 to R2. Okay, that means income is increased, then rate of interest will decrease. Okay, now and from that intersection point, we have derived this curve. That is basically a IS curve. How the derivation and that all work, I have explained in the brief. If the income is increased, that is nothing but the basic saving and investment is increased, the rate of interest will decrease. Second, see how the LM curve is derived. How the LM curve is derived. See here, you can see here how the LM curve is derived. See, I will explain through the see here, you can easily see the derivation. See friends, I think it is visible to all of you. Okay, it's visible now. Okay, see friends, with increase in income, when we increase the income, that is from L1Y1 to L2Y2, that is LP, that is nothing but the LP, that is the liquidity preference, will shift outward. That means from L2Y2 to L3Y3. See, our this central line, that is red colored, that is continuous red line, is fixed, right? When you increase the income, that means it will shift to the right. Similarly, remember friends, in the previous chapter also I have told you, shift outward of the, this is downward sloping, right? If income is increased, that means if your income is increased, your demands will be increased. If demand is increased, in the previous video, I have already told you, if demand increases, then curve will shift to the right side, that is outward. That means the LP curve also downward sloping, that is indirectly a demand for the money, that is LP curve. It will also shift to the outward, that is the right side, right? And based on the income level, LM curve is drawn. Based on the income level, LM curve is drawn. That means here, if the income increases, then the demand for the money will increase and the rate of interest will also increase. That is how that is basically interrelated. You can easily relate with yourself. If your income is increases, then your demand for the money will increase, and you can also, therefore the rate of interest will also increase. And similarly, what we can conclude, that our income is directly proportional to the demand for the money, and that is directly proportional to the rate of interest. Okay, now the important is the last here, the how the intersection of ISLM curve, the intersection of the ISLM curve. See friends, rate of interest versus income is drawn, that is national income is drawn, and we all know IS curve is nothing but the demand curve, that is liquidity preference curve. It is downward sloping, and the LM curve is upward sloping. Remember friends, they may ask you IS curve is downward sloping or upward sloping or a parabolic. You have to remember IS curve is downward sloping and LM curve is the upward sloping. In this fashion only the MCQ can frame. They will not ask you draw the or derive the intersection of the ISLM curve. We have to remember just the output. What is the output? the study or derivation what is already done by the Hicks and Hansen. You don't need to work on that. You have to just remember the what is the output of that theory. Okay, because IIB is only asking to you the one liner MCQ based on that. They are not going to ask you or give a paper and derive how the intersection of IS and LM curve is being derived by the Hicks-Hansen. So no, you have to just remember the output. See, remember friends, and the intersection of the LM and IS is nothing but the point that is called as the equilibrium, and that corresponding rate of interest is nothing but your equilibrium rate of interest. And to find that R2, they have worked and they have worked on this theory, right? That means basically what you have to remember only that the IS curve is downward sloping and the LM curve is upward sloping, and the intersection of them that both the curve is correspond to the rate of interest, which is called as the equilibrium rate of interest. Okay, now how to remember that IS is downward or LM is upward? Remember friends, in the alphabetical order, I come first then the L. That's why, and also in the alphabetical order, U come first then the D. So you can remember I and D, L and U. Okay, that is easy trick. In this trick you have to remember there is no option. Okay, if you want to pass, then you have to use some tricks. Okay, I have already shown you how the faces of Hicks and Hansen. You can see their faces. That's it. Another thing what we have to study is the before going to some question. See friends, here we are going to see some important question. From that question only you will see the how the question can frame. Before going to the actual question, MCQ based or one liner bits. See friends, according to Keynes, one important point I want to tell you. According to Keynes, there are three motives behind the people's desire for liquidity. That means Keynes says that there are three reasons. That's why people want more cash in hand or more liquid cash or more liquidity. Why? Very first is the transaction motive. That means they want to do a transaction. That's why they want a more liquidity. Second is the precautionary motive. Means people will have a fear. That's why about the future of the market or anything else. That's why for the precautionary motive they will hold the cash or for the desire for the liquidity. And third is the speculative motive. That means another motive that they are thinking that I will invest that money by the speculative way, a speculative motive to earn more. That's why they will prefer the liquidity. You just remember that three words or three lines. What is transaction? Because how the IIF can frame question, according to a case, which of the following is the not motive behind the people's desire for the liquidity? They will give option 1, 2, 3, and they will give another any one option like which is none of the above, or which they may give like a relative motive, which is not the truth. So you have to remember that three words basically, and in this fashion only the question can be framed. Okay. Now what is our aim? Next aim is to study the some question. How remember friends, if you gone through that question, that means you have completed 100% of that unit. One my request to all of you is don't go through that how the question and how the graph are drawn. Just go through the MCQ of this unit, because we don't want to do the research on the modern economics. We just want to pass the CIB. So my request to all of you, you have to learn mainly the MCQ from that unit, not the graphs, how the graphs they have plotted. Just read the MCQ. See how the MCQ can be from. Very first is the for what reason person will be required to pay interest to the bank. That means why the people are paying interest to the bank. Very first, if the person uses fund from the bank, that is also correct, because for the use of the fund as a fee it is interest. Second, the loan given by the bank contains risk. Obviously it contains risk. That means for both A and B we can say that the interest is supposed to be given to the bank. Next, what will be the nature of the interest charged on the loan with a weak security? That means if you are having a weak security, for example like a personal loan, then rate of interest charged will be high. rate of interest charge will be high. And if you are having a very strong security, for example like a government backed scheme, there will be a very less rate of interest. Why rate of interest is less in government backed securities, in government backed loans? Because there will be very less risk. Okay, now name the economist. How the question can be framed? See here, name the economist who proposed the theory of liquidity preference, which suggested that the speculative motive is one of the three motives for demand for the money. That I already told in the previous slide how the question can be framed from the motives of the Keynes theory for the liquidity. Liquidity, that means demand for the money. That means which of the following economists have proposed a theory of liquidity preference? Here is also one question here. Which of the following economists proposed a liquidity preference theory? Answer is the Keynes. Second question, who suggested that the speculative motive is one of the three motives of the demand for the money? It is also the Keynes suggested. That means in one question we can see the two questions how they are congested. Now after that my aim is to provide the important bits to you. Remember friends, these bits are very important for your examination. The question can be framed. Sorry, I don't know why that doggy is disturbing us. Okay friends, we have to see the some important bits. Ignore the doggy. See here, payment of use of money is dash element of the interest. Payment of use of money is nothing but the purest form of the element of the interest. Next, interest is different for different loans. Why interest is different for different loans? Very first, there is a risk involved, there is a trouble involved, there is different time period, and there is a different time period or different borrowing period. That are mainly main reasons. You have to choose correct option. That are all options I have given. You can choose correct from the in the examination. Next, demand for the money and supply of the money is determined rate of interest as per Digest theory. That means which theory says that the supply and demand of money determines the rate of interest? Answer is Keynes theory. Supply and demand of the money is nothing but the liquidity, and Keynes theory, the name itself, it is Keynes liquidity preference theory. Now Keynes theory of rate of interest is also called as the Keynes theory of rate of interest is also called as the liquidity preference theory. Now as per assumption of the Keynes theory, how the Keynes has assumed, we have studied. As per the assumptions of the Keynes theory, people will invest in, very first, cash or current account in the bank, and second is the long term bond. Here zero interest, here is more interest. That means either zero interest or more interest. Next is the Keynes. According to Keynes, higher the rate of interest, that is the nominal rate of interest, that means current rate of interest, that is rate of interest at the current price. That means according to Keynes, higher the nominal rate of interest, dash demand of money for speculative purpose. If the rate of interest is higher, then there will be lower demand for the money for the speculative purpose. Very important. Star mark question. See next, seventh, as per Keynes, if the nominal level of income is more, if the nominal level, what is nominal level? That is the income at the real price, or income at the current price, you can say at the current price is more. If the level of the nominal level of income is more, dash money would be held. If the level of income is more, then more money will be held. Okay, next, this is also very important friends. Each bit from that slide is important. According to Keynes, if the rate of interest is higher, the people will hold asset in the form of dash. Simple. If the rate of interest is higher, people will hold the asset in the form of bonds to earn the more money or more returns. 9. Demand for money dash related to rate of interest. See, demand for the money is inversely related to rate of interest. I have already told you, if the if the rate of interest is less, people will rush to the bank to avail the loan, that is money. So that's why demand for the money will increase. See, remember that example. Next, if the rate of interest is increases, then the demand for money will decrease. That is derived from that only. if the money supply is determined by, who determines the money supply? The monetary authority, that is nothing but the RBI determines the how and what quantity of money should be supplied. Next, if money supply is fixed, and demand for the money is increased, then rate of interest will increase. Remember friends, if money supply is fixed, that means money supply is fixed from the RBI and demand for the money is increases. If money supply is constant to the bank, that means RBI is supplying money to the bank by fixed, that is a 6% rate of interest, and people will come to bank to avail more loan, that is demand for the money will increase, then automatically bank will increase the rate of interest, right, to achieve the equilibrium. That is nothing but the increase in the rate of interest. So another thing, if the money supply is increases, if RBI increases money supply, that means how RBI can increase the money supply? By giving loans or money to the banks by the cheaper rate, then automatically it will reflect to the bank consumer, that consumer or customer will be provided the loans at the lower rate of interest, then definitely the rate of interest will be false. That means if the money supply is increased, then rate of interest will fall. Okay, these bits are very important. These are the actually extract of that unit, friends. So next is the some bits remaining here. See, ISLM model. ISLM model is also called as, remember, ISLM model is also called as the HH, that is the Hicks-Hansen synthesis. IS curve model is derived from, I have already told you, the IS curve is derived from the Keynes theory. No, it is not derived from the Keynes theory, it is derived from the classical theory of interest. Remember, IS is from the classical theory, and the LM curve, that is the liquidity money curve, is derived from the Keynes. Very important. They are asking this question, they have already asked in the previous examinations. IS is from classical and LM is from Keynes, because Keynes name itself, it is a liquidity preference theory, and liquidity preference is nothing but the liquidity money. Okay, next, IS curve derived from the classical theory. Okay, as per the ISLM model, the intersection of ISLM curve, determines the rate of interest at a given income level. That is also very important, friends. This is asked in the last time by the IABF in the exam held in the June, right, in June 2019 they have asked this question. As per ISLM model, the intersection of ISLM curve determines the rate of interest, that we all know, but it is at a given income level. That is very important. And one last thing, this is the most important, you have to remember that IS curve is downward sloping and the LM curve is the upward sloping. This is the IS curve and this is the LM curve. This is the LM curve, this is the IS curve, and this is the upward sloping, this is the downward sloping. I and L, U and D, I come before the U, that's why I come before the L, and D come before the U. You can easily remember, this is alphabetical order, this is the trick. Okay, so what is the summary of this unit? What is the interest and what are the component of interest that we basically studied? Theory of liquidity preference, that is the LM, that is given by the Keynes. ISLM model is a macroeconomic tool. Remember, one liner MCQ, important. ISLM model is the nothing but the macroeconomic, that means we study like a GDP, employment rate, that means it is at the broad level. Okay, ISLM curve is a macroeconomic tool. And when money market is at equilibrium, the rate of interest remains fixed. Remember, they may frame a question. When money market is at equilibrium, the rate of interest will increase, rate of interest will decrease, or it will remain fixed. So answer is fixed, because in an equilibrium, demand is equal to supply, therefore no changes. That's why the rate of interest will remain fixed. So friends, in this fashion I have tried at best my level to give you all the important study material, as well as the I have worked hard to make the notes also. So friends, you can avail these notes by joining our Telegram channel and the CIB study group dedicated for the CIB only. So for notes you can search on the Telegram @CIB BZ, or you can search @bankers zone official without space, or you can directly search our group CIB space bankers space zone. And one request to all of you, you have to share this PDF to maximum colleagues, share these notes to maximum colleagues so that they will be benefited. So friends, happy learning, wish you all the best for your examination. Thank you friends.